Welcome to the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you level up your instruction in order to craft authentic learning experiences for both you and your students. I'm your host, Lee Tucker, a high school English teacher and ed tech enthusiast, and I want to join you on your journey to becoming the best instructor that you possibly can. So if you're ready, grab your adventuring gear and let's get going. Hey, what's up, 8-Bit crew? Today is August 22nd, 2020, and this is episode 13 of the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast. So we're hitting fall break season for a lot of school systems. I know my school system just got back from fall break. A lot of you are probably on fall break maybe this week or next week. So hopefully you're doing well. Hopefully if you have a fall break, that is giving you the rest and rejuvenation that you need to continue on through this unusual school year. Later on in today's episode, we're going to take a look at just some ways that we can help take care of students' needs while they are in our class throughout the school year. I got an interesting little tip for you coming out of the treasure chest later on. But first, let's get into a little bit of news and updates. So in some Google news, a few things. They've had a lot of stuff come out recently, but a couple of key things that I saw that I thought would help a lot of people out. One is autofill in Sheets. So in Google Sheets now, they're going to be rolling out the autofill ability similar to what a lot of you may have seen in Google Docs. So in Google Docs, as you're typing along, it will help like autofill things for you as you're going along. Google Sheets will start to do the same thing. So if you have something like, say, a column of names that has first and last names, you want to split them in half. If you start typing in like the first name, it will start to automatically compile that in all of the rows. So it's a very useful, especially in something like Google Sheets, where you usually have a lot of data and a lot of information that's very repetitive. That's something that can be a great time saver. So be on the lookout for that for those of you that use Google Sheets. The other thing that is really helpful in Google Slides is the access checker. So if you haven't seen that yet in Google Slides, the access checker, when you share a slide presentation with other people, the access checker checks anything that's embedded in it. So if you have something like videos or audio or anything, say in your Google Drive that you have attached to a Google slide, or say you've added an audio file on a Google slide to play when you go to that slide, if the file that you've attached and embedded is not, of the same shared permissions, then that file won't play. And so what Google has now is it will check anything that's embedded in there, and it will check the share settings. So let's say like if you added a video that was in your Google Drive, but have it set to be private and not share with anybody, then Google Slides will check that and say, hey, these people are going to need this permission. You want to change the permission settings. But it was also going to do that now as you continue through that. So it will periodically check through that. Because I know a lot of times I might share files and information with certain people and certain email addresses, but then, later on, months later down the road, I might share like that whole presentation out with a bunch of people in general, but then they don't have the permissions for that. So that's a really cool feature that just will help you make sure that you've got all the share settings, because especially when it comes to something like Google Slides, when you might have a lot of different files on different slides, it's really difficult to check all of them and make sure that they are all the way that they should be. So that's another great feature coming out from Google. Wakelet has a short little update too. If you use Wakelet, now their website is going to have notifications. So it will be similar to like what you see in a lot of other social media kind of things. You'll get a notification like when somebody follows you, if somebody's added to a collection of yours, and anything like that. So it's just an easy way to kind of keep up with what's going on inside the Wakelet community. So be on the lookout for that. Next up, too, Pear Deck has some really cool new template slides for brain breaks. And what they are is essentially like these quick little 1 to 2 minute brain breaks that are already done and kind of set up for you. And so you can check those templates out. It's, just a fun little kind of break from class. Might be a good way to transition from one activity, one task to another in the middle of class. Give them a quick little brain break that you can just take out of the template slides and throw in there. And I'll put a link in the show notes to those slides, and you can just add them directly to your Google Drive, and then you can copy and paste them into any kind of slide presentation that you would be using in class. And then the last thing I've got update-wise is from Flipgrid. Flipgrid has now added text comments for students. So previously, when students watched another student video, the only way that they could respond was through another video, but they have added text comments in there now. So if a student doesn't want to record an entire video in response, they can type a text comment. That has been a feature for teachers, but now students will have access to it. So again, just another different way that Flipgrid is using some of that video student voice stuff to help students connect and respond to each other. So that's pretty much it for news and updates. Now let's open up the treasure chest and see what we've got in there for today. So today's treasure chest has just a quick little tip for Google Chrome that I think is super helpful, and that's pinning tabs. Now, I don't know if you're like me. By the end of my day, I probably have about 30 tabs open in my Google Chrome browser, and it slows the computer down and all that kind of stuff. But what also happens to me a lot of times is if I'm trying to click and drag a tab, I will accidentally click on the little X to close the tab out. And it's always a pain. And you do have the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-T that will open it back up. But another helpful thing that can prevent you from accidentally closing those tabs is to pin that tab. And so what you're going to do is if you go to a tab in Google Chrome and then right-click on that tab, you'll see an option down in the menu that says Pin. And when you pin it, what it does is it will move it to kind of the front of all of the tabs, and it's just going to be a short little tab that does not have the little X that you would click out of. So it will automatically kind of permanently stay there. Even when you close out the browser, any pinned tabs that you have when you open Google Chrome, say the next day when you log on, they will be there as well. And so it's just a quick, easy little way to prevent yourself from accidentally closing tabs out, as well as putting all of those tabs, maybe the ones that you frequently use, moves those all up to the front, and they'll be all right there together. So check out that feature, pin a tab in Google Chrome. All right, so that will take care of some of this intro material, news and updates and all that. So get your gear ready and let's get ready to level up our craft, because next up comes the boss battle. So I'm a big fan of RPG games. I love taking these role-playing games, getting into them. I've mentioned before the storyline is what really draws me to a lot of those games. But one of the interesting things about RPGs is the way that characters develop in these types of games. And when I talk about that, we're looking at just any kind of RPG, really, from Dungeons and Dragons to Final Fantasy to Legend of Zelda to God of War. All of those games kind of work the same way. And essentially what you do is you take a character and you start to develop their skills, usually through some kind of leveling up system, some kind of skill tree or something like that. So, for example, in the Final Fantasy franchise, you might have a character who is a mage that can do magic spells, and they don't just start by learning the most powerful spell. You start with the basics. So you might learn a low-level fire spell, and then as you work through and defeat enemies and level up, you learn Fire 2 or Fire 3, and eventually you learn the huge, catastrophic kinds of spells that can destroy everything. But you don't start there. And even with a lot of modern games, you've got a lot of open world games where, at the very beginning of the game, you could feasibly go straight to the boss to try to defeat them, but your character's just not there. Even if you were to make it to that boss, you wouldn't stand a chance because your character hasn't developed the skills and all of that to be able to succeed. And so thinking about that brought me to my topic today, which is just Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this because this is a very staple of education that is done through education programs, is the different levels of a person's basic needs. And those of you who know this, it's the psychologist Abraham Maslow came up with this idea of different tiers that every person kind of works through in order to become an individualized kind of person. And you've probably seen a lot of the visualizations of it as something like a pyramid. And so what I wanted to look at today was just kind of going back through that and looking at not just what they are, but how we might practically use this in our classrooms. Because one of the things that our current context in this past year has really brought home to me is the need to take care of some of the basic elements of life that are not really being taken care of for students. So the first foundational principle at the very bottom of the pyramid is just simply the physiological needs. These are all the basic elements of life that we all need in order to just survive and to live. It's things like food, water, warmth, rest. We know all of this stuff, but think about how often this stuff can be forgotten in the classroom. There are a lot of students in our class who are still at this foundational level. They are still struggling to have some of their basic physiological needs taken care of. And I'm not just talking about food necessarily. That is a common one. We have a lot of students who are with free and reduced lunch and all of that. But it's more than just that. Think about something as simple as warmth. You've probably encountered that student who maybe even joked around about why they're wearing shorts and a t-shirt in the middle of winter. And we don't think about this a lot of times, but sometimes it is just a simple matter of they don't have a jacket. They maybe can't afford one or whatever. The idea of rest, too, is something that is really crucial. I know I have a lot of students who work, and so they come to school from 8 to 3:30, and as soon as they leave school, they're heading straight to a job where they're working until close. So, their restaurant maybe closes at 11 o'clock. They're having to clean up. They don't even leave until midnight. They get home. They're having a shower, they're tired, whatever. And so they're not going to sleep until probably 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and then getting up at 6 o'clock the next day to try to go to school. And, they're having a hard time staying awake, focusing and paying attention. That's a basic kind of things that a lot of our students are struggling with. We need to be mindful of that on a very basic level. And then think about the question, how can we help provide these basic needs for our students? And something simple that my wife and I do is we'll have some food stashes, when we can. If we're going to the grocery store and see some, buy one, get one free kind of snack stuff, we'll get some granola bars or some Pop-Tarts or whatever. And I like to have those in my desk just for students who didn't have breakfast or didn't get to eat lunch or whatever. And I try to make that known to them that, I would rather them be somewhat full so that they can focus, because you know what it's like if you haven't eaten in a long time and you're hungry. You're not paying attention to a lot of other things. Same thing with something like rest or warmth. And so think about ways that we can help provide some of that stuff for our students, whether it's food or creating some kind of, we have a care closet at our school that has been a great success, where if students need some clothing, they can go there and get some of that. So if it's wintertime, they can go get a jacket to take care of, staying warm and all that. But think about what are some of those ways that that you can provide. And I'm not saying go out and spend all of your money on buying food for all of your students and all that. You take care of what you need to, but think about other ways you can do it. It doesn't have to be you at a school level. What can you do? Maybe you can do something like create some type of food pantry for students that don't get a lot of meals at home or anything like that. Because the reality is, if their basic needs like that are not being taken care of, then they're not getting much out of sitting in class. They're not thinking about learning deep educational ideas. They're just thinking of, where's my next meal going to come from? So what are some practical ways that you could look at implementing things like that in your class, in your school, in your district? The next step up the hierarchy is safety. And so when we talk about safety, we're talking about security, safety, feeling taken care of. And one of the things to keep in mind here is that we're not just talking about physical safety, although that is a major concern for a lot of our students and all that. It's not just physical. Think about things like emotional security, freedom from fear. Social stability comes as a part of this. And that's a huge thing for a lot of our students, especially right now. Medical safety, physical safety. We've got the whole COVID-19 thing going on, where students who have immunocompromised kind of issues are having to worry about, whether or not they're going to catch this and all that. We've got racial injustice issues that are going on. And so we have a lot of students who are afraid because of just who they are, who they were born to be. We've got a lot of hate, a lot of division that's going on in our country right now. And so a lot of students are coming into our room just insecure. They don't feel safe about who they are, whether it's their physical safety, whether it's their emotional safety. So think about how we can help them feel more safe in our classroom. We've got things like resource officers that help with physical safety, so we don't have to worry about gunmen and all that kind of stuff. But what about other things that are going on that we can do to help provide a safe atmosphere for our students? Because the reality is, again, your classroom may be the only source of security that they have if you are providing that for them. And so think about some quick ways that we could do that. A few ideas that I came up with is one, I mentioned a few episodes ago in my Google Forms episode about check-ins. I like to have that Google form available for them to check in to let me know what's going on. If they're struggling with something, if the whole social emotional wellness stuff that is becoming a thing now is a great opportunity to help gauge how safe and secure students feel in your classroom. So maybe something as simple as a check-in that they can, in a quiet way, let you know what's going on. Another thing that I've implemented this year that I got from a book is called A Charter for Compassion. And I'll stick a link to that in the show notes. Basically, it's a charter that we develop for the classroom of how we are going to treat each other respectfully and compassionately. And it's something that I'll refer back to a lot in class. And so that's a way that we can take something like these racial issues, these injustices, these divisive kind of things, especially in political season and all that. And we can look and sit down and say, hey, we decided that this is how we're going to treat each other. We're going to talk to each other respectfully. We're not going to, call names and denigrate people for who they are and what they believe. And it is a process, but by, acknowledging that kind of stuff and working through it, it does help to provide that sense of security where we are working toward understanding each other and treating each other fairly. And so think about what are some different ways that you can help ensure a safe and secure atmosphere within the walls of your classroom, whether it's physical safety, but I think more importantly right now, mental and emotional safety and stability. The next step up is the sense of belonging and being loved. And this is the whole idea of the relational aspect of life. So this is the social stuff, friendships, relationships, and all of that. And think about how we can embed a sense of belonging into what we do in class. It kind of takes that previous step of safety and security, but then takes it to that next level where it's not just that students feel secure, it's also that they feel like they belong somewhere. Their differences being accepted by the people that they are around. So what are some ways we can help students feel like they belong in our class? And one of the ideas that I came up with as I was thinking through a lot of this was just simply finding ways to bring a social aspect into your class. How can you make things more social to create that sense of belonging? The students get comfortable with the people that they're around. They get comfortable with just their select group of friends. So how can we, mix it up a little bit? How can we do things to help them widen their sense of belonging inside of our classroom? And there are a lot of ways I think we can do this, because a lot of it just deals with us bringing in activities into the classroom that get them engaged with each other and interacting with each other, rather than just sitting at a desk and working on their own. And I'm not just talking necessarily about group projects or anything like that. So a few ideas that I came across that I like a lot is something like what I do with my daily writing prompt is a 2-minute share. So I'll have them, every day when they come into my classroom, they've got a little writing prompt just as a warm up to just practice some writing stuff. But a lot of times I will tell them to take 2 minutes to just share at their table or with their group or with somebody sitting next to them what they wrote about. And again, what this does, it's not necessarily about the writing itself. It's about the idea of sharing ideas and listening to one another. I like to do it a lot with, not necessarily like personal things, but opinion-based things. Even something as simple and goofy as like, what's your favorite restaurant and why do you like it? But it gets them talking, it gets them sharing, and they start to understand that they have things in common with people that they may not realize they had things in common with. Another thing that I really love to do that helps provide a sense of belonging and students being loved in my classroom is just finding ways and times to have conversations with them. More than just I'm teaching them information, it's that I'm there to kind of help them navigate, to help them learn whatever it is they need to learn. And so I like to try to have conversations with them as much as possible, not just about my class, but about anything that's going on. We're right in the thick of, college football season right now. So I'll get into conversations about a lot of my students who are college football fans or soccer fans when soccer season's going on, or I love playing video games. So sometimes I'll connect with students there. But just finding those different ways of kind of connecting with them, showing them that you are interested in what they are interested in, even if it's something that you don't know anything about, like showing that you're interested in learning about it is a great way to make those connections with them and make them feel like they are a part of your classroom, not just a body in a seat. So think about some ways that you can embed some of this socialization kind of stuff into your classroom to give students that sense of security and belonging and a feeling that they are loved. And on the whole, idea of being loved, one of the things I started doing this year is, I've told them this year that everybody should go. Every day should hear at least once that they are loved. And so I always make it a point at the end of class just to tell my students that I love them and hope that things are going well for them. And, some of them that literally might be the only time in the day that they hear that somebody loves them. And I want to make sure that they get that. So I think that's a really cool new little thing that I've tried to do. And I've even had a student a couple of times this year told me that they love me too, and it just really made my heart happy. All right, so the next one up close to the top of the pyramid is the need of self-esteem. And this is this whole idea of prestige, of accomplishment, of feeling a sense of pride in what you do. And, a lot of times I think students who don't do in class don't do things because they lack the self-confidence in it. I know from an English teacher point of view, a lot of my students who I struggle with getting to do work, it's always because they don't feel confident in their ability to read, or they don't feel confident in their ability to write something. And so it's very important to try to take time out to help them develop this sense of self-confidence, of self-esteem, in what they are not just able to do, but the way that they're growing in their ability to do it. And I would pause a moment to just say, think about how you talk to your students. Is the way that you speak to them, or the way that you speak about stuff going on in class, does it help promote and encourage self-esteem, self-pride, or does it kind of take away from it? And the reason I say this is a lot of us as teachers, I think especially in the high school area, we like to rely a lot on sarcasm, which I'm not saying is a terrible thing, but when you rely so much on your sarcastic nature, think about how that affects students. Even if they know that you're joking about something, it can really, really hit hard on people's insecurities and detract from progress that they're making. And so one of the things that I would suggest to do out there is find ways to encourage your students in any way that you can. Even if it's just kind of changing the tone of the way you talk to them, of the way that you perceive what they do. And it's a challenge. I mean, I'm not going to lie and say that it's easy. You know that there are a lot of students out there. It's hard to be encouraging because maybe they're just extremely negative, or they're just those difficult kind of students. But it doesn't mean we don't try, and it doesn't mean that we should stop doing it. But there are a lot of small things too that we can do to help create this sense of pride in self, pride in the work that students create. Even something simple as just praise and encouragement. Telling students, a student that you appreciate their hard work. Telling a student that you notice the progress that they're making. We could do something like, in a gamified sense, you can do something like leaderboards or digital badges or something like that is a visual manifestation of those accomplishments to help them, feel that sense of pride in what they've done. One of the things that my wife does in her class is a brag board where she'll it's a small little dry erase board that she'll put names of students who are just really doing excellent things in class, not necessarily grade driven, but just working hard, or things that she notices them doing. So that's a good, easy, quick kind of thing that you can do. But just think about what are ways that we can encourage and empower students every day in our class. And then the last thing at the very top of the pyramid is the self-actualization. And this is the goal. This is the top end of it. This is the idea of achieving one's full potential. This is creating individual learners. It's creating self-driven students, students who are not only proud of what they do, but actively look for ways that they can better themselves. And this is our goal as educators, is to help students get to this point. But I think a lot of times we forget that it is the end goal, and it is not something that they are going to achieve very easily and very quickly. We want to jump straight to this a lot of times. I know I do a lot. I want my students to be individual learners. And so when I get started with them in August, it's always a struggle because I forget how much progress maybe students the previous year had made toward that. And so I have to kind of step back and remind myself that everything is about progress. And so we can't always just jump straight to this. That there are some students who are there who have those other foundational things, the physiological, the sense of belonging and self-love and all that kind of stuff. And they have kind of hit that point. But we can't just automatically assume and expect every single student to necessarily get to this point. And so my biggest idea to help students work on achieving this is just the idea of empowering and supporting them. And I've talked a lot in previous episodes about my idea of empowerment and support and creating self-driven students where even if they're not getting some of those foundational needs met, we're still working to create some of that for them. And so something like student choice gives them the empowerment of picking something that they are engaged with to work on, but then also providing support for them at the same time when they stumble. So it's not me holding their hand, dragging them along behind me. It's more like me standing behind them as they walk forward, and then I give them a little boost. Or if they stumble backwards, I can kind of catch them and support them and help them along the way. But one of the biggest things that I think we need to keep in mind with all of this is that all of this stuff can fluctuate. This is not necessarily something that's just a one and done kind of thing. Oh, well, as soon as somebody's physiological needs are met, then they move up to the next step and the next step. And then once we get self-actualization, then, we're done and they're ready to go. This, tragedies happen and students have some of these needs taken away. Maybe a parent loses their job and all of a sudden they don't have, food and home and shelter and all that they used to. And then all of a sudden, a student who was maybe up there in that self-esteem range or that self-actualization range has now all of a sudden kind of dropped all the way down to the bottom, and they're struggling to be motivated because they're concerned about all these other things. And so it's important to keep this in mind as we continue working with students throughout the whole year, that just because a student is somewhere does not mean that can't change in a heartbeat. And so being aware of that, knowing them, talking to them, and having those conversations can help you go a long way with helping them work through this process, so that when you notice something change, you can kind of figure out what it is that they need. And then the last thing that I'll just say about this is I know the response that a lot of people have with all of this is, well, that's not my job. My job is to teach them. And I would agree. Yes, our job is to teach them the content and the standards of our class. But at the same time, this is a mindset change that I've had in the last few years is I can't teach them if they're not ready. And what I mean by that is, if I have a student who is hungry and exhausted, it doesn't matter how hard I try to teach that student the content. If those needs are not met, then nothing that I do is going to matter, because they're not paying attention to that. They're not focusing on that. So yes, it's not our job to be their counselor or provide food for them or whatever. It's not our job, but I'm telling you from my experience in the last couple of years, as I've really leaned into this, that even though it's not my job, doing these things helps me do my job so much better. And I have just noticed a big change and a big shift in the culture of my classroom, just from the sense of my students knowing that I love them, my students knowing that I'm trying to take care of them as best as I can to the best of my abilities. And no, I can't do every single thing for them, but I will help them as much as I can along the way. So hopefully that gives you some ideas and gets you thinking a little bit about how you can just help work with your students to help them with these different levels of needs, to help them become more successful, not just students in your classroom, but people in life in general. And that brings me to the question of the week, which is coming up next, because I really, really want to hear your ideas. All right, so for this week's question of the week, I really want to hear some feedback for this, because I am interested in different ways of doing this stuff. What are some of your ideas for helping take care of students' needs, different needs in the hierarchy from Abraham Maslow? So what are some things that you do or ideas that you have for taking care of just any of those levels, any physiological, self-esteem, belonging, safety, security, self-actualization, any of that? What ideas do you have to help students develop in those areas and to take care of those needs? You can send in your responses to Twitter by using the hashtag 8bitcrew or tagging me at Comic Socks. Any longer responses, you can leave a comment on the episode page on my website, 8bitinstructor.com. Well, thanks for joining me this week. That will just about wrap up this episode. Hey, if you are on fall break, I hope that you have a wonderful, relaxing, and restful week. Don't do any work. Take some time to rest. Take some time to recharge. It will all be there when you get back regardless. So take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, make sure that you leave a review on your podcast app. Or hit that subscribe button so that you can get new episodes as they come out. But please, please, please share and tell others and help them get connected to the 8-Bit Crew community so that we can be there to help and support each other. Make sure to check out some of my other content. I've got a blog at 8bitinstructor.com that has just some different writings and all of my reflections and tutorials and all that, as well as my YouTube channel, which has some EdTech tutorials to help you out with some of that. If you want to support the show, then you can do so by donating at Patreon, patreon.com/8bitinstructor. And all of that stuff is in the show notes. So until next week, keep leveling up that craft, and may your swords stay sharp and your shields hold strong. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and check out the 8-Bit Instructor YouTube channel for EdTech tips and tutorials, as well as other content on my website, 8bitinstructor.com. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Comic Socks and use the hashtag 8bitcrew. See you next week.